Hi, I'm Marcia Everts, and I'm sitting here today with my husband, Serge Koenig. We've been married for 23 years, and I will be interviewing him. So, where were you born, and what was life like there?
Well, I was born in Madagascar, which is that humongous island off the coast of Africa, and it's very near the equator, so life was warm. I would say life was hot. We had a rainy season and we had a dry season, and our typical clothing was a pair of shorts for most of the year. So I was living in the tropics, living in the warmth, and because it's so hot and the houses are very basic, mud stuccoed homes with grass thatched roofs, it was just a place to crash at night. Most of life was spent outdoors, spent outside. The cooking, the eating, the playing, the washing, the laundry and chores. Everything was outside. And so even with just so much time in the outdoors, that the house was really kind of an insignificant part of life.
You talked a little bit about hunting, and I remember stories about fruit bats. Can you tell me more about that?
Sure. So because we had spent so much time outdoors and there was no access to TV, I think I saw my first TV when I was 11. And we had to find ways to entertain ourselves as kids. And so we would make slingshots, we would make bows and arrows, blowguns, and we would gather, like newspaper and roll them up into a wad and stuff them in old socks that we would find around and play soccer with that as a way to entertain ourselves. We would fish a lot, make our own fishing poles and bobbers and all of that. But we would also do a lot of hunting too. And one of the things we did hunt for was fruit bats. And these were not your typical brown bats that you see here in Wisconsin. They spent a lot of their time eating mangoes and other fruit. And so they were rather large in size and they were somewhat of a delicacy. So they would only come through our area when, I think it would have been during the rainy season, where the fruit was plentiful. And so, we would hunt them at night, either with slingshots or with nets, and then we would eat them, and they were delicious. They were quite the delicacy, actually. So it was a treat to have one of those, actually.
When did your family decide to move to the United States, and what was that experience like for you?
So we moved to the United States in 1982 when I was 11 and a half, going on 12. And we moved due to political instability in Madagascar. My dad is from here. My mother is from there. And so we moved back to the States. And fortunately for us, my dad's parents were in Ohio. And so we lived with them for a few months. And then we got our own place across town and stayed there for a few more months. And eventually then by that next spring, so we moved in September. And by that spring, I would say May or June, my dad got a job in Iowa, Atlantic, Iowa, over on the far western side by Council Bluffs, Nebraska. And I was held back a grade, so I should have been in 6th grade, but I actually started in 5th grade because of the language barrier. Madagascar's language is Malagasy, and the second language is French. And English was something that I think they were starting to introduce to us as kids in 5th grade, 4th grade, but I didn't know any English, and so the language barrier was just too much, so they decided to hold me back 1 grade, and I'm glad they did because I was really behind and very silent. I went from being a precocious boy who talked an awful lot to extremely silent. Embarrassment, just not knowing how to speak the language, obviously, and not wanting to appear unsmart. And so kind of kept silent and had some private help. And it was a struggle for sure. It was just a struggle making friendships. But the universal language is play at that age. And so that was how I made friends. It's just through play. I was more silent. And also, I went from hanging out with kids and my friends all the time to learning to be by myself, I would say. And so it's a skill that I think has served me well into my adulthood, just learning to occupy myself and be by myself. And so picked up little things along the way. I picked up painting and drawing because that was something I could do by myself. I still kept up the hunting and the fishing and stuff whenever my dad could go with me, but I could fish by myself too. And so, and then ball games, didn't know what baseball was, had to learn those rules. Didn't know what football was, had to learn those rules. I've seen people play basketball, but I've never really played, so learned to do that. And within about 8-9 months, I felt pretty comfortable with the language and felt like I could kind of hold my own with that and communicate with friends. And probably a good year by the time I was completely comfortable. When I started dreaming in English, that's when I knew that I was well on my way to learning this language. And unfortunately, as I've gotten older, it's been 41 years, I just forgotten my native language. I mean, I know enough of it to kind of piece a few things together, but I've forgotten most of it, unfortunately. Not too many Malagasy folks in Wisconsin or the United States to speak Malagasy to keep up the language. And of course, at that age too, I'm trying to fit in and adjust and and just about every school I was at, I was the only black kid in town or a black kid at the school. So there's all those adjustments also that I'm working through as I'm figuring out what it means to be just a person, and much less a black person and a kid in a foreign country, and learning to use a fork for the first time. I never knew what that was. Like, it doesn't make any sense. How can you pick up rice, which is the universal food in Madagascar? It goes with every meal. Me being the cook at our house, we pretty much had rice multiple times a week. But in Madagascar, it's like, well, why would you eat a rice meal with a fork when you can get so much more with a spoon? And so that was weird, and that was an adjustment. I remember that vividly. And then just the cold. I think I probably frostbitten most of my fingers and my ears. Just learning how to put on a coat and why you need a coat and how to put up with Wisconsin winter. So we were in Iowa for 2-3 years, and then we moved to northern Wisconsin, Anigo, Wisconsin. And I went to middle school and high school there. And then I went to UW Stevens Point for a degree in natural resources. And that seemed like a natural fit for me because of my upbringing, spending so much time in the outdoors, playing and just having so much fun outdoors. And it seemed like just a natural fit for me to want to go into the outdoors as a profession. And it's really meaningful work for me. And I think it all ties back into my youth and upbringing and my origin story. And it's something that, with what we know about the climate and how it's warming, it seems pretty imperative. And I'm glad I went into that line of work for sure. And it fits me well.
Well, we're running out of time. I would ask you about our boys and what you would hope that they would have picked up having a father who was from another country, but I think that's for another conversation. So we'll sign off.